So today's speaker, we're welcoming Chris Spangler, marriage and family therapist. She has a master's degree in integral counseling psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies. She's worked as a therapist in agencies and in private practice in the Bay Area for 14 years. Chris has a growing general practice in Sebastopol with one special focus being gender-related concerns. Chris is trained in EMDR and works both from a mindfulness-based perspective and psychodynamically. Chris is herself gender variant and has studied the subject of gender for as long as she can remember. She is a member of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, Gaylesta, LGBT Therapists of the Bay Area, and of course, CAMP. Welcome, Chris.
Hello. Does it work? The sound?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another installation of cheap CEUs from Recamped. Can I get rid of this? Thank you. Like you heard a couple times now, my name is Chris Spangler. And I was thinking earlier, what if I don't get elected president-elect? Will I be able to do this presentation? So thanks for that vote of confidence. Last month, Laura Strom gave a beautiful presentation. Anyway, so last month, Laura Strom gave a lovely presentation that was very streamlined and specific about a specific protocol. It was rather linear, and it went like that, and I loved it. And this is not going to be anything like that, because what I'd really like to present to you today would take all day. And it was actually a very frustrating experience for me to try to pack it down into an hour and a half, and that's including special guests, which I'm so glad we have. Actually, there you go. But we have two special guests who will be here later. So what I want to talk about today is sort of two things. One is gender in general. How our ideas in society about gender affect each and every one of us and all of our clients, and how as therapists we could be doing a disservice to people if we don't make space for that or even directly ask about people's gender experience. And then the other part is for people who don't fit, whose inner gender experience doesn't match the roles that they're expected to play because of their body. Transgender people. So let me get started. I'm going to go really fast just to try to get as much in as possible. So forgive me if it's too fast. Keep up, people. Ding. So let's see. So you may be aware that right now there is an absolute explosion happening in the realm of gender. I mean, right now I bet every one of you can think of one person who's transgender, right? That didn't happen 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Chaz Bono. I can't think of anybody else right now. But there are lots of people. Well, a few people anyway. Chelsea Manning, right? So some of these people are making outward changes, which is paving the way for other people to make outward changes, and then also to just continue to question gender as feminists started to do years ago. All right, so some things that we need to know are, as therapists, that we are comfortable with and aware of our own feelings and gender biases. So we'll talk about that. We also need to know what the special challenges are for gender nonconforming people, some of which you may never have thought of. Also, what somebody who is seeking transition, gender transition or sex transition, needs to do or know. And unfortunately, we're actually not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I do have a handout that some of you got, and if you didn't get it, try to find one or email me. Also, to be aware that any person in distress, any person who comes to you in distress, part of that distress might be dissatisfaction, or that's not the right word, but dysphoria about their gender. So, again, making space Helping people feel safe enough to talk about that with you is important. Even if you are not a gender specializing therapist and don't know enough and know that you don't know enough to help someone through transition, you need to be able to make space for that so that you can find out and then, if need be, refer them. All right, what is sex? You might think you know what sex is, and I'm not talking about doing it. I'm talking about male-female, traditionally male-female sex. So what we have are our physical anatomy, chromosomes, and hormones. All these things together make up our sex and determine, well, actually, usually it's just the physical that determines what our assigned sex is. That's a concept I want you to understand. It's a big concept in the world of transgender language. Assigned sex, assigned gender. That's a very important concept because who knows what people's sexes are? And I'll tell you why. 1 in 2,000 people, so it's not rare, 1 in 2,000 people are born with ambiguous genitalia. Intersex people, we'll call them. And that's physical. That's just physical anatomy. So that's just one thing. Some of these, a lot of these babies are surgically altered soon after birth. And then maybe after that, before puberty or at puberty, given hormones to help them stay on the track that was chosen for them, about which gender they're supposed to be, or which sex they're supposed to be. There's a movement now among intersex people and other supporters to end those surgeries on babies and allow human variety to simply be human variety. This is a great quote I love from Milton Diamond, who has done a lot of research and work around intersex people and trans people. Nature loves variety. Unfortunately, society hates it. It's a big conflict at this time. All right, chromosomal differences. This stuff blows my mind. You know, so what females are XX, males are XY, right? We all know this, maybe? It's not true. It's just not true. There are people born Y. There are people born X. There are people born triple X, XXX. These are the sexiest people. I just thought of that. There are people, so normally people have 47 sex chromosomes. Some people have 46 or other numbers. 1 in 1,000 males are born XYY, and they have certain characteristics. 1 in 600 are born XXY, male genitalia, but it doesn't really develop, so they end up being sort of prepubescent and more womanly when they're adults. That's a lot, 1 in 600. 1 in 5,000, 46XX, girls who end up with a masculine appearance. And you've heard about differences between male and female brains. Interesting concept. Seems like there's a lot of truth to it, but not black and white. It's not like there's a male brain and a female brain. There are hormone receptors in our brains, and some people have talked about, maybe you've heard of this, hormone surges that women have when they're pregnant. So a fetus in gestation gets washed with these, with a certain hormone, and if it happens at a certain time, it affects the receptors in the brain and makes small changes or big changes in the brain that have to do with sex and gender. It's very little understood, but the basic point is it's not as clear-cut as one or the other. So again, this is why we use the terms assigned sex and assigned gender. Okay. So far, I've been using sex and gender, just sort of willy-nilly throwing them around as I'm talking. And for people for whom their physical sex and their gender are aligned, which is probably most people, I guess, it's hard to understand the difference, I think, between what is sex and what is gender. But for transgender people, it's very clear. They're very different. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what gender means for those people. I say trans people, but that also could just be gender variant people, gender non-conforming people. Gender identity. G is your felt sense, a person's felt sense of what gender they feel closest to or belong to. Or maybe it's neither gender, or maybe it's all genders, or both genders, or some other gender. Gender expression, as you can guess, is how you express that feeling, that self-identification. What do you wear? Do you wear makeup? How do you have your hair? How do you walk? What activities do you do? And then your gender role, the role is put on you. The role is what you're supposed to do. And these gender roles are, as I say, vary widely across cultures and across time within a culture. So I'm going to talk just for a second about how they've varied across time in this culture. Anybody can guess who this one girl, it's one person. Any ideas? No, you probably don't have any idea. It's, I'll tell you, it's Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This is in the late 1800s, and at the time, boys and girls alike wore the same clothes until they were about 7 or 8 years old. And I mean, you don't have to go that far back to a time when everybody wore robes or dresses, or, this whole idea of pants and dresses is very new. So these things change, but in any particular period of time, like they become very fixed in our minds, and a lot of shame is put on people for not adhering to the rule. Okay, I mentioned in the newsletter article about this talk, pink and blue. Here's a quote from Earnshaw Infants Department, a trade publication in 1918. The generally accepted rule is pink for the boy and blue for the girls. The reason is that pink, being a more decided and stronger color, is more suitable for the boy, while blue, which is more delicate and dainty, is prettier for the girl. Wow. How do you like that? Other people matched colors with pink and blue with eye color and hair color and things like that, regardless of gender. It's about marketing. A lot of our current gender stuff right now is about marketing. All men need to have a gun or whatever it is, and all women need to have perfume. And, it's very much about marketing, I think, or at least very much reinforced by marketing. You can sell more that way. Okay. Oh, I love this quote too. Arlene Lev is a great researcher and writer. She wrote a book in 2004 called Transgender Emergence. She writes about how gender normative behavior is not necessarily a healthier or more functional form of gender presentation. So actually adhering to your gender role, as you're supposed to do, is not necessarily the healthiest way to be. That's her point. Okay, it's just chicken scratch here. Okay. All right, so here is one possible, can you read it? It's really small, isn't it? Yeah. Can we turn off the light? Oh, the light, can anybody do that? Yeah. Okay, so this is one possible way of conceiving of these different things here. Biological sex is on a continuum on its own. Gender identity is on a continuum by itself. Gender expression is on a continuum by itself, and sexual orientation. And every single individual person has all of these going at the same time, and they're different from each other. Maybe you can just think for yourselves for a moment where you fit along biological sex. Do you even know? Most people don't know if they're not just the one or the other. Intersex is the one that's in the middle, if you can't see it. Gender identity. Are you the most feminine woman, if you're supposed to be a woman? If you're assigned male, are you the most masculine male that you're supposed to be? Or are you somewhere in the middle? And then, how does that express itself? How do you express that? I kind of said that wrong, actually. Let me just back up. Well, no, never mind. I like it better, masculine or feminine. Okay, gender expression, masculine, feminine, or androgynous. What would you call me? Maybe androgynous. And then sexual orientation. Just to be really clear, that's a completely different thing. Completely different thing. You can be any gender in the world, and also any people. Okay, so let's say you have someone who is assigned male at birth, transitions to being female, and is straight. Say this is assigned male. This is a person who looks male and assigned the role of male. They play the role of male, perhaps, and they're straight. They like women. And then they transition to being female, and they still like women. So then they're lesbian, possibly bisexual. It does happen that sometimes the process of transitioning allows people somehow more freedom. It does happen sometimes that people get more open about sexual orientation after a transition. Maybe in particular with female to male transsexuals, they tend to be more open to dating men. Small numbers of them, but that does happen. But it's not, as far as we know, related to their gender expression or their gender identity. Okay. Oh, I just like that cartoon. Okay, will you all look at a handout that you might find somewhere around there? I didn't have enough for everybody, unfortunately, but exploring our own relationships to gender.
Another second.
Great. And this requires you to pair up with someone. So if you can do that as quickly as possible, just pair up with somebody next to you. Okay? Okay. And when you've done that, okay, can we please try to do this quietly so I can keep talking, because I like to hear myself talk. So this is for you to look at quietly yourselves and then share anything you feel like sharing. Okay, so quietly yourselves first. Just think about it. And notice how it feels to imagine sharing any of these things with someone else. 10 minutes on this. Okay, finish your sentence, please. Let's come back to silence. That's it. Thank you. Yeah. No. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Come on back. So now we're all in the mindset of how gender affects all of us, and I want to show you a little video clip. It's actually a trailer for a movie called Straight-Laced, which is a brilliant documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. Straight-Laced, and it's interviews, basically interviews with high school students of all gender and sexuality persuasions, talking about how gender affects them. This is just the trailer.
I like to play with gender roles because it confuses people. I like it when a guy thinks that I'm a girl and then figures out that I'm not a girl. I love that.
I may be male and I may be straight, but I'm not completely rigid and narrow way of what you would call masculine.
I don't know where I stand in the whole manly versus, feminine.
I feel like I have both masculine and feminine qualities. I don't feel one way or the other.
I'm just not female.
Everywhere you go, there are gender messages. There's no real way to make a decision in the world without having to think about gender.
It's all the time, every day, 24/7.
Come on.
Guys are supposed to wear baggy clothing. No, they gotta dress cool and they gotta match.
It's supposed to be like curvaceous and supposed to have like big boobs and big butt and skinny little waist.
Wearing the shirt that I'm wearing right now, the purple color, automatically people think that I'm gay.
Dad will take me out and just, all right, son, I'm gonna teach you how to jump a car today.
A woman has to clean the house, they have to take care of the kids, they gotta wash the dishes, and that's what women are for.
Which, honestly, I think goes back to, cavemen. People think that the whole gay community is, sex crazy, and they just want, sex, and that's all they think about.
You don't want to be a prude because then no one's gonna like you, but you don't want to be a slut because then no one's gonna want you.
Nobody on my cross-country team that I know of knows that I'm gay.
I think people would be surprised that I'm bisexual.
I just happen to fit on the transgender line.
That's kind of one of the things that makes, the world a beautiful place, is if you have change and you have difference. Because if everything was the same, then that's just boring.
By the way, all these cartoons are in a book over there. It's a coloring book about gender called Girls Will Be Boys Will Be Girls Will Be. Okay. I don't have a segue here, but one little statistic I wanted to throw out was that 80% of all youth harassment stems from judgments about gender, whether related to sexual orientation or not, regardless of sexual orientation. Kidoke. So what I'd like to talk about now is how you can demonstrate as a therapist your openness to clients' sex, gender, experience in the world with gender. Firstly, I would say don't assume that they're satisfied in their gender roles. Ask. Make that be a part of your history taking, of your assessment, of getting to know somebody. You might ask, you might say, many people are negatively affected by the role gender plays in our lives, or something like that, or by stereotypes of manhood or femininity. How about you? Were you content to be a boy? Were you content to be a girl? Did you feel pressures around those things? Because if you don't bring it up, they will probably be terrified to do so. Terrified. And I'm actually going to get later to why that might be. I think you can guess, but it is unspeakable for most people, the concept of not fitting gender-wise. Let's see, websites, very first contact for a lot of people. Some of your websites, I don't know you in particular, but some websites I see out there for therapists talk about men and women. I see those websites and I say, oh, I'm not welcome there. I treat couples, and firstly with the man, I do this, and then with the woman, I do this. And I do understand there are differences between men and women, and some of us specialize in working with women or working with men, and that's important. Maybe there's some room for slight language changing. It's like, I run a group for men. All self-identified men are welcome. All people who identify as male, welcome to this group. What is that? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, let's see, what else? Okay, if you're going to ask, are you married? That's a little bit different now that marriage is legal for queer people in California, but are you married? It's still a dicey question for people. Are you in a relationship? Do you have a partner? And then never assume the gender, the sex of that person. Say parents rather than mother or father, mother and father. Child rather than son or daughter. Until the client says it. If the client says it, then you're good to go, right? Because they might want to talk about other people in their lives who are gender variant, gender nonconforming, trans, and not know if it's safe with you to do that. All right, here's a really basic one. If you have a form, I don't have a form like this, but some people do. If you have a form that people fill out, intake, and if on there is male and female, you've lost it already from the get-go. Never mind, they're never going to say a word to you. Other, prefer to discuss in person, something like that, or decline to state. And make your space a welcoming space. What books and magazines do you have in your waiting room? Is it CoverGirl on the cover and GQ magazine or sports cars? I mean, all those are fine. But is there also something that that's neutral, something that might appeal to anybody? Some people have seen, and I keep meaning to do this myself. Some people I have seen have a sign in their office that says explicitly something like, or in their waiting room, something like, all people, people of all races, faiths, sexual orientations, gender expressions, blah, 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 welcome here. Or this is a safe place for da-da-da-da. I think that's a great idea. I mean, just be explicit. Don't beat around the bush. Sizes. I wanted to say that one too. Oh yeah, your bathroom sign. Does it say man or woman? Does it say unisex? Does it have a picture of a person with a dress on? These are hard ones. I don't really know the answer to the bathroom, because some transsexual people say, yes, you guys tried to make me be a man for all those years, and now I am a woman, and I'm going to wear a dress, and I'm going to go to the women's bathroom, and that's what I want to do. So I'm making myself tear up right now just thinking about it. Okay, so I think you get the idea. You're trying to make space. You're being careful with your language. You're being careful about what you have present in your waiting area, on your website. What words are you using about gender? And in your pile of papers there is a list of terms about gender. I didn't make enough, so there might not be enough to go around.
Is it possible for you to email this stuff?
Yeah, well, I understand it's going to be on the website.
Okay, so the notes will be.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we put up the video, there'll be copies. There'll be PDFs of all of these.
Okay.
So you can go to the website.
Before I talk about the terms, I did just want to say also why it's so important, and that is because people kill themselves about this issue, you know what I mean? it's a big, big deal for a lot of people, and you can't always know for whom it is that big of a deal. Some trans clients say that their process was delayed for years because they were with a therapist who they didn't feel was welcoming or didn't get it, you know. And so it wasn't until they quit that therapy and went to a trans affirming therapist that they were able to really even just talk about it. People who are seriously dysphoric about their gender, you know, they really feel distress about the difference between their gender expression and their assigned roles. You know, they're really at high risk for depression, anxiety, drug abuse, other risky behaviors, you know, anger issues, and like I said, suicide. The best thing you might be able to do is refer them to someone who really understands. Okay, so let's look at this list of terms, but I don't really have time to spend much time with it. If you look at it, can you see anything that you have a question about? Some things that are not on there are names of hormones, names of surgeries that, you know, people who are actually transitioning need to know, but other people don't need to know necessarily. There's lots and lots of slang that is not on there that trans people use with each other or for each other. You'll see that some words have adjective in parentheses at the beginning of the definition, and that's to make sure that we're not calling people a transgender. You know, nobody wants to be a transgender or a heterosexual. We're people. We're heterosexual people, or sorry.
Could you quickly read through the list for those of us?
Oh golly, it's too long. Yeah, I think. Any just quick questions about any of these words come to people's minds? Thoughts?
It's a good list. Nice.
What's that?
Good list.
Oh, great, thanks.
I've got a question where it says here gender fluid, gender flexible. So it says not adhering consistently to a single gender identity expression. So is that frequently seen? I mean, is it someone who's trying to identify? I'm sorry. Is it someone who's trying to identify or work through these issues, and so there's this ambiguity, or is it someone who actually moves from one to the other because it feels natural?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it could be that it's somebody who's exploring, but if somebody identifies as gender fluid or gender flexible, then they've sort of come to a place where they say, you know what, that's just who I am. That's how I am in the world. Sometimes I feel more like this, sometimes I feel more like that. Yeah. And my answer to that is anecdotal. It's from my own experience, because I don't know of any studies, you know.
In my exploration of soul work, in some of the research I found, that there's a theory that we actually might have a male or female soul, and we might, like, you could be a woman with a male soul, and I'm just wondering if you have anything to say about that.
Well, what's a man and what's a woman? What's a female soul and what's a male soul, given what time period and roles for that time period or culture? You know what I mean?
maybe a not either or soul, right?
Oh, maybe a what?
It could be both.
It could be both. Yes, it could be both. I think many people are both, or somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Yeah. Any others? And then we need to move on. Oh, sorry. Okay.
I guess I'm wondering about the issue of adolescence and searching and confusion around, gender identity, sexual identity, and this issue of surgery prior to adulthood. I've seen some articles about that and just what the general, if there's a consensus.
About transitioning as an adolescent? Yeah. I mean, that's a really big topic that I'd love to have a conversation with you about another time. I will say there are a lot of people working on this issue. There are specialists I would definitely contact if you had a child in that position. There are legal ramifications and realities with parents, especially if there's a divorce. There are puberty blockers. People will the doctors can slow down puberty to give somebody, a child, more time, to even years of time, to think about what they want or what they need. I mean, some kids, they know when they're born, when they're 3 and they're 4, they're saying, I am not the gender you tell me I am. Those kids, it's kind of a no-brainer, and they do it. They go ahead and transition at puberty, because they're going to have the more success than people who transition later in life. More success with their physical appearance, anyway. So it's a big question.
You know what? I think I just figured it out.
Okay.
It was just a terminology question.
Oh.
Related to that one, the movie Trans is really excellent in showing a little girl, and talks about the youth and also an adolescent. It's a wonderful movie called Trans.
Great movie. Yeah.
There's also, I'm sure people are familiar with an excellent long novel by Jeffrey Humanities called Middlemarch.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a great book and charts the whole life of a person who goes through lots of changes in this whole process.
It's a good one, yeah. I think I need to just go on. I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, Laura.
Oh, wait.
Okay. Some statistics. I'm just going to bang, put them out. One question I've always had is, how many are there? Right? How many people are we talking about here? Gender variant, nonconformist people. This guy, Gary Gates, is a researcher in trans topics. 2011, his study concluded that 1 in 333 of all Americans is transgender. That is a lot of people. I don't know where he gets his numbers. It seems like a lot to me.
You said 333?
1 in 333, 0.3% of Americans. And I don't know exactly what his definition is of transgender, but I would guess that it's, I identify not right at extreme ends of that line. But still, there's a lot of people who call themselves transgender. And where we live, next to the Bay Area, where people come from all over the world to transition, we're likely to get a lot of people. I was going to say more. It's just hard to imagine more than 1 in 333. But, and then other researchers have estimated, this is just male to female transsexual people, 1 in 500. So it's a different number. But that's transsexual. That's people who have decided to really go from one apparent gender to the other, the other extreme, and have taken steps to do that. Okay, trans people are suffering, as we know. This is a very vulnerable population, one of the most stigmatized and oppressed groups in our society, culturally, institutionally. People are frequently denied employment, fired, denied housing, refused service in restaurants and hotels and bars. Everyday issues present anxiety and problems for trans people, often. Going to the bathroom. There's an app for that, for trans people, right? There's an app for that. Where is the nearest gender-neutral bathroom that you can access in this area? And trans people, upload these things to share with each other. Dating, shopping for clothes, swimming, going to the gym, the locker room. The list is endless, you know, the obstacles in your everyday.
I was racking my brain about that study you asked about.
Yes.
I remember now.
Oh,
it
great.
was any form of gender nonconformity, gender identity,
Okay.
gender attraction, and gender presentation. I mean, gender role, gender identity, and gender presentation. It was any form of the fluidity.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Okay. Right, some more stats. It's dangerous to be transgender or transsexual. An average of one trans person, or one person who's known to be transgender, is murdered in the United States every month, at least for the last several years. And undoubtedly there are more that we don't know about, because there are those that are not reported because they're throwaway people. There are those that are reported incorrectly by their original name and sex. Or it's not designated as a hate crime, which is how these numbers are collected. 60% of trans people have been victims of hate crimes. 60%, yeah. They are victims in 40% of cases of police-initiated violence. I think we know who those people are mostly, you know, because of the lack of opportunity for jobs, especially for the more visible male to female transsexuals. They end up being prostitutes, right? They're on the street, or if not on the street, they're still doing illegal prostitution work because that's where they can get some money, make some money. And then they're prime targets for police harassment and violence and other people's violence. 60% of trans youth report experiencing violent assaults. Okay. Oh yeah, the highest levels of verbal and physical abuse for youth, trans youth, is from their parents. How about that? 59% of trans people report a history of rape or forced sex. And connected to what I was just saying, Jamison Green, who's a well-known trans activist, wrote in 2000 that almost all reported violence against trans people is against male to female transsexuals. All right. So getting to mental health and the mental health community. As we were just talking about, puberty. Puberty sucks, right? Puberty sucks for everybody. I'm still on that same slide. I don't have any other slides. We did that one too. But if you're, can you read it? Me and my boy Tommy got 98% on our man test. What'd you get? Okay, I don't know why I just put that in. I'm talking about something really serious. Puberty sucks, and for transgendered kids, it's 1,000 times worse. It brings on body hatred, shame, deep shame, and can really deeply affect people's mental health forever. One result of that, here's a 2005 survey, 32% of trans college students had attempted suicide in this one study. A survey of 6,450 transgender people, so that's a pretty large number. 41% reported suicide attempts, and that is 25 times higher than the general population. Gender nonconforming children are at higher risk for physical, psychological, and sexual abuse, and then that raises the risk of PTSD later in their lives. And how have mental health practitioners responded? Mostly pathologizing, traditionally, but that's changing. Thank goodness, it's changed and it's changing. In 1980, they introduced gender identity disorder in the DSM, which was great. At the time, that was great. It allowed people to have access to mental health care and medical health care. It said that the treatment for this is hormone treatment and surgery. So it opened up a world of access there's also some controversy, but I don't have time to get into that. Now, in the DSM-5, it's no longer gender identity disorder, that's out. It's gender dysphoria, which is even more embracing of people's identities. It says that it's not you or your identity that's the problem. It's the incongruence between your feeling of your gender identity and the role that you're expected to play because of the body you have. So it puts something on society. And it says, of course you have a problem. I mean, of course you're feeling bad. You have this situation, and now you can get treatment.